So a little bit about remediation, and we'll talk about medicinal properties together. I like teaching these together because they're in the same mindset, you know. So remember the railroad ties? You go out, if you want to find mushrooms doing unusual things, just go out dumpster diving. You're going to find it, all right? Like everything. So I find mushrooms in contaminated sites. I also put things out to see if mushrooms will show up, right? Like a trap. Build it and they will come. You know, I've got Petri plates with different contaminants on them. I'll go down to the, to the beach and just open it up and swirl my hand around and close it again and see if there's any spores in the air from that area that'll eat that particular contaminant. It's pretty wild, so after the BP oil spill, y'all remember that? It was like Earth Day. It was like Earth Day. Poof. Poke a hole in the planet, see what happens. And it was just bubbling for weeks. And I was sitting on shore, back in South Carolina thinking, man, I have mushrooms that eat oil, And this stuff is washing up on the shore and all the wildlife and, but nobody was capping it. So Olga created this awesome poster. It was a real poster she made. But I like the action items on here. It says anyone can help the Gulf oil spill if we can find mushrooms growing on dune vegetation, mangrove trees, driftwood. We're looking for salt-tolerant strains that can be tested. All right? How many of you have ever been to the beach? How many of you have ever been to the beach mushroom hunting? You will now. Because I had no idea. As soon as I put this out, mushrooms started showing up everywhere on the beach. It's crazy. Salt-tolerant fungi growing right in these wet, sandy dunes, just like that. All right? These are white rot fungi. That's a class of fungi that, have you ever seen mushrooms growing off of wood and it turns the wood white, like firewood, really soft? That's white rot. It leaves a white bleaching. It's getting rid of the lignin. Lignin is the chemical rebar molecule of that wood. Keeps it strong and rigid. You take lignin out, it gets soft. Well, mushrooms run out of lignin, and they look for other things to eat. Remember the duck eggs? Now we're at that moment. You're like, I remember. So that's what these mushrooms can do, is we're looking for salt-tolerant strains. So we clone them. People are, shipping them to me all the time. I have boxes. I'll have boxes when I come home sitting on my desk with little mushrooms from everywhere. Could be an infected bug. It could be a mushroom on the beach. And then I'll whip motor oil into the gel, get the fungus growing on it, and then before you know it, that mushroom is eating nothing but 10 weight 30. Right out of the bottle. That's nuts. Right? And the interesting thing about that is that mushroom would be edible if it fruited. Right? It doesn't hyperaccumulate into the tissue. So we have a research project we're doing right now with Furman University. That's a master's student. And we're teaching her how to grow mushrooms on contaminated soil that's spiked with atrazine, right? And she's going to figure out by which pathways and which biology shows up where the fungus can break that down, but does it get translocated into the fruiting body? And so far, we haven't seen it do that, which is great. So think about mushrooms in your garden. Think about all the wonderful things that a mushroom is doing. When you see a mushroom growing in the garden, whether you put it there or not, I would say, thank you. So I do mock oil spills for my classes. What I'm getting at too is if you spill something, unless you're perfect, if you spill a little bit of oil or your car drips a little bit or your tractor, the hydraulic fluid is coming out of the tractor, that never happens, right? Tractors don't leak. They are really leaky, right? Fill it right back up, right? But if it's dripping somewhere, I get my sawdust from a logger, all right, and a sawmill rather. and wherever he parks the big, you know, the claw thing, the grappler machine to load up the sawmill, that thing just drips. And it's worse than this. It's like the soil is black, and it reeks. And I'm pretty sure if you light a match, it would just go up in flames, the dirt, right? And then I told him, I said, this is easy to fix. You would just cover this with wood chips, inoculate it with oyster mushrooms, because oyster mushrooms have the wide key set, remember? Those wood chips are going to colonize. Then you're going to water it and sweat the enzymes into the soil. Then the enzymes combust and break down your hydrocarbon here, just like that. So anybody can do that at home. It's so easy. You just dig up the soil, put it in a bucket, mix oyster mushrooms into it, and it's gone. Like 10 weeks later, it's gone.
So it doesn't even have to fruit?
No, fruiting's not required at all. I really don't want them to fruit in some means because, you know, just for liability sometimes. Not all mushrooms are equal, but oyster mushroom is by far the winner, that whole group. So if you're looking for a mushroom to remediate, write this one down. Phoenix. Phoenix oyster. And why the phoenix? Why not the white oyster, Pleurotus austriatus? Phoenix oyster is Pleurotus pulmonarius. It has a lilac spore print. It prefers warmer weather. It can grow on any hardwood. And also, if you get the right strain like I did, I found it growing off of a Virginia pine. Again, one of those awesome discovery moments where I was at a mushroom foray and all these mushrooms were brought in and somebody luckily brought the twig that it was growing on. You see, a lot of people just pick the mushrooms to bring in for ID. I'm looking at it and everyone, all the identifiers know I do research, and I said, you guys find anything unusual? And they're like, oh yeah. You're definitely going to want one. And I said, what is it? He said, it's an oyster mushroom growing off of a pine. So as soon as the event was over, I take it, I clone it. Now I have like one of the most awesome mushroom strains to break things down, because it'll eat just about anything, right? That this one won't. This one's still good, don't get me wrong. The one that you have is Pleurotus austriatus. That's the one blue, okay? But pulmonarius, the phoenix, is crazy, yeah. If I don't, I'll make it up.
If you grow a mushroom, if you let the mushroom fruit in one of these remedial situations, how would you test it to find out if it's safe to eat? Or do you know automatically that it's okay?
Well, I wouldn't assume that. You'd have to send it off to a lab for analysis, which isn't cheap. That's why we're doing some research, because the university's helping pay for it. It's kind of cost prohibitive because we're not really, all my research costs a lot of money. It's like it's a black hole. And I'm not getting anything back from it yet. Maybe the antibiotics one day, that could be awesome, wouldn't it? But remediation research, there's really no money in it. And nobody wants to fund it either, which is sad. A lot of the companies are like, it's cheaper just to dig it up and dispose of it than to invest time and money into a whole new area, which is bizarre. So I've had some big companies come to me, and I'm talking about like Duke Energy. Hey, we'll pay for our spawn, our time, my remediation staff, if you can just pay for the testing. And they said, well, what proof do you have that it works in the field? I said, well, that's why we're doing this, you see? They don't want to come halfway. Somebody will. So here we are with Furman University trying to make some things happen on our dime. You know, so we have some data. That's what we need. They want to see data. We'll get it. Right, so here's a cool experiment. Right. Atrazine in soil. If you look up atrazine, it's pretty nasty herbicide. It's on the EPA priority list. They don't want it. They really want it banned, but there's so much support from the genetically modified seeds that they're still using a lot of this. So this is why we're spending time on this one.
So I started growing, putting atrazine in my gel, the labeled rate, you know, 1 tablespoon per gallon, whatever that is. Put a Phoenix oyster I was telling you about on there, and within a couple of days, it ate up the whole plate. Then I did double the labeled rate. It ate up the whole plate. There's no other food in that. All right, gel. Then I did triple the labeled rate, and it grew out like a quarter, and then it just stopped. Look at that, day 10. It was like, I don't think so, buddy. You know, a little bit too strong. So I figured that's per million. I started doing the math, figuring that's the threshold, right? Watch what happened. I came back into the lab 2 days later. Poof. That's telling you a story, right? Mushrooms are awesome. They're going to acclimate. They're going to overcome. They're going to dial up a chemical key. They're going to find the right combination, and they're going to unlock it. So that's how remediation works. Mushrooms don't do it by themselves. So that's me just training fungi, you know, from a light to a strong solution, trying to figure out at what limit, you know, can these things eat this stuff? And you can almost get it to the pure molecule state, where it just blasts the molecules apart and uses them like food. Here's some of my bacterial studies. I just show you that a lot of mushrooms have novel antibiotics. They're very unique. So here's the fungus and 2 bacterial strains. I think I used E. coli for this, just to show you. A lot of mushrooms are active against E. coli. E. coli is 50% protein by weight. So some mushrooms stun them, kill them, and eat them as a food source. All right, so there's my 2 pellets. That's a shiitake fungus. I was trying to corner it, you know, like a wild animal. 2 bacteria on either side. What's it going to do, right? So in 2 days later, watch this. Bacteria swims far away. That's a flight response. So that's called an inhibition zone. All right? All that. So I did all these reps over and over, and every single time the shiitake was highly active against E. coli. Right? Oh boy. So there we go. Ready for a sing-along? What goes in must come out. Right? Just like the bacteria. I'm not sure if I deleted that slide. Oh, I did. It was gross. All right, so my state, find your state. If you want to download Indiana, look at your impaired watersheds. Now, here's a good opportunity. Remember, you're growing a lot of oyster mushrooms, potentially. You have a lot of oyster mushroom waste. Remember? Before you give it to the worms, why not put it out in the wild to make a living biological filter where the water can be cleaned? You know, runoff, site runoff. Are there any chicken farms in Indiana? Say hell yeah. Hog farms? Are these eco-friendly resorts? They meet the requirements, right? Maybe the bare minimum, but that's just the state of the industry. But what if they knew, right, that you had something to help them? So this is where we can work together to fix some of the problem. This is the fecal coliform impaired watersheds in South Carolina, all the purple. Oh man. All right, the blue dots are human populations. I'm missing the slide, but if I go back and find it, the cattle population, all those dots fit wherever the pink zones are. So it tells me that agriculture could be mostly responsible for this. Failing septic systems, very little. But our agriculture, our livestock are wandering through creeks and streams, and there's no filtration. It goes right into the watershed. All right? So if we all knew how to plant mushroom mycelium in the wake of that water or that runoff, a manure holding pond, for instance, if that overflows, it's going right into our water. Right? That's the Mercury Advisors of South Carolina. Right? Anybody want to go fishing? So the idea is that we need to keep trees and vegetation close to runoff sites, right? That's what mushrooms want. If you don't have it, then you recreate it. You create a riparian zone. The leaves fall. The mushrooms eat the soil. Excuse me, the leaves. They make soil. They make a network of mycelium there. If there was a parking lot where I'm standing and the runoff goes through, if there was no trees or vegetation, all that runoff goes right into the creek. And that's not good for aquatic life or biology at all. All right? That's why a lot of places you'll see have rain gardens, runoff gardens. You see those big ones? Right outside of a Walmart or Home Depot, you see a big depression there with an overflow, right? What's it lined with? Clay. What's growing in it? Grass. Let me give you an idea, all right? Most of them have just grass, and people cut the grass, and then they fertilize the grass. What does fertilizer do? This is your quiz. Remember, it's been a long day. What does fertilizer do to the plant? Kills the mycorrhizae, or not kills, it doesn't let them exist. So you're basically dealing with a monoculture of grass with a bacterial dominant soil. So there's no fungi to really work on that. So I think if we knew that, we would improve the soil biology by adding mycorrhizae to those grasses and not fertilizing them, you know? Look at that. If we do all this, our site runoff, the water will be cleaner, right? Because that water has to push through mycelium that mines out the extra fertilizer or nutrients. If we do all that, Indiana, the platypus will come back. So that's what you're looking at, is a micron filter. That's what you're making. When you're growing mushrooms on straw or that waste, you're creating a micron filter. You could pour water through that nursery pot. Remember the nursery pots? Pour water through it. There you go. You could strip out bacteria. Bacteria is fast, all right? You love E. coli. I love it. Chicken. How many of you have chickens? Mm-hmm. I have 45. Doesn't sound like a good idea for 3 people. 45 chickens? It's a lot of eggs, right? But you know, they were so cute. Damn, I get in trouble now. I go to the damn store and there's one, you know, one left. I said, I couldn't just leave him there. She's like, oh my God. She goes, can you take it back? I'm like, no. One chicken was blind, had extra, the skin was grown over its eyes. You know, it couldn't eat. So I took it into the lab and did surgery on it. Opened its eyes up. Pretty wild. Pretty wild, huh? Anyway, chickens. What goes in must come out, right? So this is in my book. I take this particular mushroom. That's the King Stropharia, right? This is a good one. Remember this. If you have a chicken or chicken yard or run, get wood chips in there on the floor, 6 to 8 inches deep, and then put your mushroom mycelium in there, and it colonizes the whole floor underneath their feet in the run. And then when they poop in there, it kind of disintegrates. All you have to do is like water the run, and it just disintegrates and goes down into the mushroom mycelium. So the mushrooms eat that. They'll stun and kill the coliforms that are in the manure and eat them for dinner. Right? Then you'll have mushrooms probably popping up around the outside of the coop. They generally don't fruit in the coop. I don't know why. A lot of activity. Right? Chickens, my chickens don't eat mushrooms. They don't like them. I don't know why. I figured they get buggy and wormy. Yeah, I don't like them. Tried.
So you're saying you put it the mycelium into
the wood chips. All in.
Just have a bag there to show us?
Yeah, that's just to show you. Remember, one bag would do a cubic yard. Remember that math? So one bag would do a pretty big area. There's the enclosure on one end. So I actually put poultry wire down
somewhere in the middle so the chickens don't dig down to the base. Oh man, I was going to answer it.
It was in the water.
Oh, darn it. Is it time for something? It's time for chickens. Yeah, I put a little bit of poultry wire here. Otherwise, they'll dig down pretty deep. You know how they sit there in dust and try to do all that stuff? So I wanted to preserve at least a little bit. Let them dig a little bit up here, but a couple inches down, just put another layer of wire. That preserves the whole barrier idea. And also extending it past a fence or enclosure, like a foot or so, because of a rain event, runoff. That works pretty good. Chickens. How many of you cannot have chickens? Is there some kind of city ordinance? Not in Indiana. Well, in South Carolina, they for a while, you couldn't have city chickens.
It depends on the cities.
Yeah.
A lot of them do allow a small number.
And even homeowners associations, I get it. There's rules. But even in some cities, they're changing that. Like X amount of chickens per household, no roosters. So why? Yeah, so it's noise, and what's the other concern? Smell. Runoff, yeah. Smell and runoff, noise. Laying hens are pretty quiet. Neighbor's dog is louder, let me tell you that. Whoa. You just brought up the vulgarity bar. I'm not going to go there. So what has more coliforms per gram, a chicken or a dog manure? Dog. 10 times more coliforms are in a dog's manure than a chicken. So when someone says, we don't want chickens, I was like, yeah? What about your dog? you want the data. That's how I bring that to city council, It's true. They traced a lot of coliform bacteria, tracing it back to dog parks, you know what I'm talking about, and very upscale neighborhoods. Yeah, it's just like they've traced it right back to the dog owners. Them cats, they bury it. Kingster Ferry is the one you want. Let me see where I'm going with this. Oh, yeah, so also you're picking the right mushroom, not only for its ability to, let's say, kill bacteria or break down atrazine, you may also be interested in the tensile strength. Because I have really good fungi for absorbing heavy metals out of the environment. All right, Morel is one of them. Morel mushrooms hyperaccumulate lead really easily. They magnify it into the fruiting body. All right, that's why I'm kind of particular about where I go morel hunting, to be honest. I test them sometimes. When I go to a new spot, I don't know. Remember the guy with 160 of these? I tested those because I thought this is just abnormal. So I tested them for lead and arsenic, and they all came out negative. I was just a little curious, that they were mining it or maybe using it in some way because they were just so irregularly large, right? Kingstrafaria will hold about 20 to 30,000 times its weight, and Morel mycelium won't hold anything. It's like cotton candy. It just falls apart. So is a Morel a good mushroom to use for a site erosion control? No. Kingstrafaria is better, but look at this. It actually, see how ropey that is? It's like, it's not a complete filter. So I don't use Kingstrafaria anymore, right? I don't care what mycelium running says, right? Paul should change that. It's not good. So the best mushrooms for site runoff are going to be turkey tail mushrooms. Turkey tail, reishi, polypores. You can colonize this stuff. This is biodegradable material. Look at that, see? For site runoff, that's pretty cool. You see this all the time. You can inoculate these with mushroom mycelium. Anybody ever seen straw on the side of the road? DOT, Department of Transportation. I was so impressed by this, and not seeing any of the the plastic netting you see on that stuff, that
photodegrades, breaks up into smaller plastic. It's pretty novel. And I see this stuff on the side of the road. I'm like, yay, you know? They're using something that's biodegradable. But how is that staying together? Does anybody have an idea? No. Oh, they do have it in the mats, but this is different. This is loose straw. So I get out of the car and I walk up to this hill at Furman University, and the closer I get, the darker it looks. It's splattered tar. So it's straw from a distance, and there's splattering like speckled tar to glue it all together. Bing! Right? Why not do the same thing, except throw out mycelium that will glue the straw together in a matter, it may take 2 to 3 days, but you could do that. That's doable. So now we have fungi that we're experimenting with for erosion control, which is awesome, right? And turkey tails are really good at it too. Anyone with a turkey tail? Ever seen those? You should. They're everywhere. They grow everywhere, every continent. They'll grow on straw. They won't like it. They're not going to fruit, but they'll do their job. The whole idea of remediation is just to let them do their job, not interested in fruiting at all. Mycelium can grow. The other one is reishi mushroom. That's a really good one. High tensile strength, rapid rate of growth. You know, so I study rate of growth of these organisms. I also look at holding ponds to percolate, gravitate, go through different systems. That's a bit complicated, so I'm just going to breeze through that one. Runoff sites, such as this. This is behind my chicken coop. And then I would put in bales of straw. Y'all seen bales of straw used for erosion, yeah? Construction sites. You know, I think they should be inoculating these. Be much, much better. Yeah. Put those biodegradables, then the water has to slow down. The idea is too, here if it was more watertight, it would have to push through the mycelium to get through the other side. Right? Biological contamination is easy to pull out. Remember the E. coli? That comes out quick because it's a physical trap. But chemical degradation is totally different. If we have a runoff site and there's atrazine in the water, it's going to go right through this, isn't it? Right? So you need what's called contact time for molecular stuff. You have to have a long time to do that. That's why that grass in the rain garden just kind of irks me a little bit. I'm like, it's not doing anything. It's not slowing it down. It needs longer. It needs more contact time with the mycelium. This is our nature trail at Mushroom Mountain, right? It's an interpretive trail. We've got mushrooms planted all around this bend. It's like a mushroom zoo. You know, every mushroom has their own little location. But on the site runoff from my parking lot, the water was flowing right through here. And over here is where all my employees' cars were parked. You follow? You know, I don't know if they're dripping or not, but just for, you know, to protect my forest, I've got a spring down in here. Really clean water that bubbles out. I don't want to contaminate that. So I filled these bags right here full of wood chips and turkey tail to hold it all together. And then in the middle here, I filled with reishi. So I have 2 different types. Do you have a question? Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, and it's not dense enough for it to fruit, but it glues it together like really well. So there's different things mushrooms do for the environment, which is mycoforestation, devastated habitats to restoration, and now you have biodiversity back again. All right. It takes the upstate South Carolina. It takes 15 feet of soil. Did I tell you that this morning? Yeah. It takes 79,000 years to put it back. That's crazy. Mushrooms can do it in months. You know, we invite the wood chips. So there's a stump that was inoculated with Dryads Saddle. It's a mushroom that can tolerate quite a bit of sun. Is that important? And when you're remediating a logging site, Yeah. A lot of mushrooms won't do it. They don't like that environment. So Dryads Saddle is good, beefsteak mushroom is good, and they're going to decompose that stump, turn it back into soil. That's what we want. Uh-oh. No. I know it looks suspicious. Like, how does Chad get all these crazy ideas? All right, I had to explain this slide to my mom, you know. Spores are adhesive. They're sticky when they come out. So if you do a spore print on paper, it's hard to get off. So if you do it on a glass or a mirror, you let them dry, and then you could scrape them up and harvest them with a razor blade. That's how you like scooping them all up. Look at that. That's a lot of spores coming out of those, just a few spore prints. This one's called Hyphiloma. It's a brick top, and it loves to eat stumps. You know, it likes to, that's what it does. It's a good beneficial mushroom, you know. How many of you have a bird feeder? You can get some bird seed, make some spore prints of some beneficial spores, mix up the spores into your bird seed, and fill your bird feeders. Now you have employed the wildlife. What goes in must come out. So these birds are dropping spores everywhere in contaminated sites. How about that, huh? Go Earth Army. Fun to watch. Other things you can do with spores, you can make spored ink. We're working with a company for this. I actually filed a patent for this because I think it was huge. Interesting angle on it. We're taking spores, 100% spores. There's no ink in there. And we're running it through a printer, the ink cartridge, and that's what it looks like under the microscope. It's like 100%, it's like a biodegradable ink that's alive. I think we're calling it living ink. And all these spores, it's color fast too. So think about that. If we could put that in the newspapers and our programs, things, as soon as you get them wet, they self-destruct and turn into mycelium and turn into soil again. Why not? All right. A little bit of remediation. Let's talk about medicinal molecules next. Is there any questions on remediation? Nope.
I feel bad I didn't come in the morning. Like you guys told me all know the answers to this. You have spores. I know spore print, you do spores. And you sell spawn.
Yeah.
And then you talked about putting mycelium into the woodsheds.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know what mycelium is. That's a little ruby hairy stuff.
Yeah.
But what's the difference between spores and spawn, and then why would you use mycelium instead of spores?
Well, that's a good question because by using spores, you're kind of at the mercy of competing with all the other spores out there. It's like all the horses coming out the gate at the same time. Mycelium is around the track. I mean, it's colonizing. It's out-competing things quickly. Remember, the spores have to land, germinate, then they have to mate. They have to find a soulmate. And they're not all just going to land next to each other and just, you know, hook up. It's not that kind of a club.
So you sell mycelium as well as spawn?
Mycelium is spawn. Yep, that's what you all got. All right, so when you look at medicinal compounds, just like penicillin, right? I mean, is penicillin even effective anymore? Right? The bacteria figured it out. They produce beta-lactamase or something like that to break it apart. It's pretty bad when our bacteria are now eating the things that are, you know, they're using it as a food source. There's bacteria now that eat methanol. They eat it. How does that make you feel about going to a hospital? You know, it's tough. We over-disinfect things, and bacteria are going to figure it out. That's just the nature of it. They're small. They replicate. E. coli replicates every, 16 to 18 minutes. Binary, lot. That's a lot. But when you look at mushrooms doing different things, they're all different. Some of them do all of these. Like the reishi mushroom. That's why they call it the mushroom of immortality. Some are very specific. They have a specific focus of a condition. But we're in immune modulation, anti-inflammatory, and sugar regulation. What class of patients would benefit from that? Diabetics, right? It's also liver tonic. Nerve degeneration and disorders. Name some conditions. Parkinson's. Alzheimer's. MS. Antifungal. Nerve degeneration. How about football players with chronic concussions? I can't remember what they call that. Something like that. Chronic concussion disease, maybe. Maybe that is it. I don't know. But they're starting to use some of these fungi. We'll talk about that. Antifungal, I've showed you before. Molds attacking the other. Right, that's good. Antibacterial, I've showed you. Cancer fighting. Apoptosis. All right. And virus inhibition. It's just amazing that mushrooms can do all these things. I think it's untapped. It's totally untapped, Mushrooms produce what's called as a cascade effect, immune modulation. A fancy name for it would be called adaptogens, right? If y'all look at the back of the program, do you see the back of our mushroom extracts, all the language that I'm using? You can borrow from that too if you make your own extracts. And I'll show you how to do the extractions. We might have to use that dry erase board. It gets pretty chewy. It's a lot of math. Mushrooms contain molecules like beta-glucans, but they're also, going back to the light, they're manufacturing it based on light. All right? So the quality of a medicinal mushroom is directly associated with the environment. So if you have a crappy environment, what are you going to have? Crappy mushrooms. That's true. They're medicinally inferior to some that are grown right. Right? Now let's go back and look at those enoki mushrooms that are grown in the dark, high CO2, compared to ones that are grown in the light and bright. Right? A lot different. Remember that? No vitamin D. Analyze the vitamin D in those albinos. What do you get? Nothing. The one on the right, high. Now, you've learned so far today that long stem, I should cover this before we move on, it's important. Two things can make a mushroom stem long and a cap small. What are they? What's one of them? Lack of light. What's the other? High CO2 or lack of oxygen. All right? But what is this one missing? Pigmentation. So I can walk into any farm and immediately know if this was long but had a yellow top, what's the problem? CO2. If this was long and albino, it could be both. But if it's short, right, with no pigmentation, it's probably, right, low light, which probably wouldn't happen. All right, so here's another factor that affects the color. So you might want to write this down. It's interesting. I don't think it's in my book because I discovered it after, like 2 years ago. I had to give a presentation to like SpaceX people, engineers for growing mushrooms in space and stuff. They're wanting to know what affects the quality of the mushrooms, the medicinal properties. And I said, I just gave a 20-minute spiel on it. But the interesting thing was that, let's say, I'm going to use an example, okay? This one's easy. The pink oyster mushroom, canned fruit. It can fruit at 60 degrees, and it can fruit at 105 degrees. That's a pretty big window, all right? What temperature do you think that mushroom matures the quickest? Obvious, right? 105. So it comes out and woof, it's mature in 2 days. All right? The one grown at 60 degrees, it's probably going to take a week to a week and a half because it's growing really slowly. Metabolically, it's really slow. But let me tell you something about the color. This is really important. The lower the temperature, the darker the color of that same strain. If I grow it at 60, it's going to be almost red. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. If I pick those off, I let it rest for a week or two, and I move it into a 105-degree room, those are going to fruit really fast. The mushrooms are going to be white. It's like they lost all their desire to produce the pigmentation. Like they need a darker pigmentation at a lower temperature for some reason. That's cool. So what sell better? If you're selling pink oyster mushrooms, the ones that are darker and pink. Yeah, I couldn't figure it out. For years, people were like, God, sometimes my oysters are white and sometimes they're pink. Is it the strain getting tired? You know, I don't know. And finally just hit it. So, same thing with the blue. All right? If you grow this blue oyster mushroom that you have at 75 to 90, they're going to mature almost white. If you grow them at 50 degrees, they're going to be almost black. So you can kind of dial in the temperature that you want based on the color, right? It sucks to be advertising warm blue oysters, and they're like, well, these are white. That's what they're white. Yeah.
If you overlight your mushrooms, could that also stunt growth?
Can you overlight mushrooms? Will it stunt their growth? No. Direct sunlight could.
So if you're doing indoor, though, have the light on.
Indoor, I have my lights on 24/7. Yeah. If you go under 12 hours on and off, remember, because if they're off for 12 hours, they're still growing. So what is the stem doing? It's getting longer. You don't want that. 24/7. Oh, I thought someone was crawling. There's damn mushrooms kicking in. So now let's look at why is the reishi mushroom so amazing? And polypores in general. Polypores meaning no gills, right? Because they're growing for 2 to 3 months. It's like a solar panel. Mushrooms are like solar panels. So they're out there and they're exposed to all that light. And they hate UV light. So they're creating molecules in their tissue to protect themselves, like sunscreen. Does that make sense? So these are melanin-like compounds. That's true. What do you have in your skin? Melanin-like compounds, melanin, that darken, right, in response to sunlight. Mushrooms do it too. How much more do we need to be in common? Remember? We took an oath. You weren't here. No. What are we? We are mushrooms. Yes, you can. We'll adopt her. She's following me around from conference to conference. Like my wife is like, "Do you have groupies?" I'm like, "I don't know. Sure."
You do now.
I do now. Thought escaped me. Oh, I know it was. All right, so again, looking at the symmetry, now let's go over a few different mushrooms and their qualities, all right? Wood ear. How many of you have never eaten a wood ear before? Hold your hand up. How many of you have had hot and sour soup at a Chinese buffet? See? Gotcha. Gotcha. They snuck them in on you. But
If they make it right.
yeah, if they make it right. Or seaweed salad, you know, you get a little sliced. It looks like seaweed, but it's not. It's a little black, like brownish strip that's crunchy. Absolutely zero flavor, nothing. It's like a flavorless gummy bear. So why are we eating these things? What benefit do they have, right? Well, I'll tell you what. They're a natural blood thinner, which is really good. With no side effects. I might add. Right? Compared to other pharmaceutical drugs. That's the truth. It is a anticoagulant. What does that mean? Yeah. Keeps your platelets from clogging up, which means you eat a lot of wood ears. All right? Do you go out in the woods by yourself chainsawing? Does that sound like that's the worst idea. You nick yourself, you might bleed out. That's the truth. That's how they discovered this, right? So it's a huge, if you eat a lot, don't eat too much, but anything in moderation. But this one's good in moderation. Do not eat a lot of wood ears, right? Or do some aggressive knitting like she was. Break up with her boyfriend's son, I'm like, ah! Don't knit mad. All right. Here's some more of the cordyceps mushrooms. We'll talk about some of these as far as they're medicinal. Not only do they mummify bugs and pop out of their brains, which is awesome, but they also modify our brain as well. All right. These are mushrooms growing off of false truffles. These two, Elaphomyces, and then this is the one, probably the one people are growing now. Someone mentioned growing cordyceps. What is it, Cordyzilla? Who is talking to me? Yeah. Militaris is the easiest one to grow. All right, I don't cover cultivation here on this one, but just showing you other cordyceps strains. Oh, there's one. Carolina leaf roller cricket. Look at all those growing off its body. Pretty wild, huh? I feel like it lost his head. But do know that mushrooms, cordyceps mushrooms, are well known for turning on your immune system. But what a lot of people don't know is that in the mold state, you remember it has a mushroom state and a mold state? They're chemically totally different. The mold might actually turn your immune system off completely, such is the case with cyclosporin, right? This is an organ transplant drug that they use. They turn your immune system off, put in your new lungs, put in your new whatever, and so it doesn't reject it, and then they'll turn your immune system back on. So we can't assume that every cordyceps is beneficial for a healthy human being. I mean, the common cold would kill you if you did that walking around. You'd have no immune system. It's pretty wild how it grows out of a fungus. It grows out of a bug. I mean, who figured that out? Cordyceps militaris, this is the one. This is the one that's like worth its weight in gold. It's a really good fungus. They're starting to cultivate it now. What's the website you said was? Mushroom Life? Yeah. Yeah, okay. We also have cultures of it too. We share things, so we carry it. We carry all the, there's enough business for everybody, but we carry syringes so you can make your own jars. It's pretty easy. But if you're looking for these, here's how you tell what it is. It's got these little dimples on the top. Do you see these little dimples? Little tiny little warts, right? There's a lot of little orange fungi in the woods, but this one has dimples. It's the only one that has little bumps. And then when you dig it up, when you look down underneath the ground, you'll see that it's connected to a larvae here. That's how you know it's a cordyceps. So you dig down into the ground, you'll find your little prize, right? There it is. Look at that, nice and cleaned up. Growing right out of a bug. And you don't need the bugs to grow these now. They figured out how to grow them in jars, right? Make a little nutritive mixture, put it in a mason jar, inject your spawn in there, and then these little antlers fruit right out of the jars. So what is this mushroom good for? All right. The cordyceps has some of the strongest antivirals right now. So antivirus. So how does that work? Does anybody of you study viruses or know how they replicate? They attach to your cells. They dock on them like a space station. They dock. They inject DNA. The DNA assembles with your DNA, right? They borrow from you. Then they shoot right back out. explode the cells. Some just, bud out like an HIV virus does that. It's crazy. This mushroom has been found to stop that replication process in 3 or 4 different mechanisms. That is huge, right? A single pharmaceutical molecule doesn't do that. It goes after a single mechanism, right? So now we're seeing these mushrooms are multimodal, They're getting all kinds of mechanisms all at once. And it's hard to out-evolve that, you see? So that's what makes mushrooms so wonderful, is because they're operating on different mechanisms, right? So if you grow them right, good, healthy, organic, medicinal mushrooms are amazing. This other cordyceps, sorry, the text is disappearing. This one is called Elaphocordyceps, E-L-A-P-H-O, Elaphocordyceps. This one is showing really strong activity as a nerve tonic for brain function. It prevents the oxidation of the neuron, the sheath. The myelin sheath protects it. And this one's actually showing how it reverses the effects of Alzheimer's. That's huge. That's big. That's good news, right? Dementia, Parkinson's patients, the shaking, the eye twitch. There are some Parkinson's patients who are taking this with lion's mane, which I'm about to discuss. And these were patients that were confined to wheelchairs who could not even feed themselves. And one of them's driving a car, and the other one's walking around cooking dinner now, right? Something's going on here.
Is this the same cordyceps that went through the bug's brain?
No, this one grows out of truffles. Yeah, it's a little bit different. But that's Elaphocordyceps. But see, these aren't being cultivated yet. That's the problem. You have to find these. So that's why we need more people experimenting, like these guys are doing with the cordyceps. Learn how to grow that one first. That's the easiest one, which it isn't that easy, is it? It's not.
Well, and it's strain specific, just like you were saying with
Yeah.
the other mushrooms. Some won't fruit indoors, period.
Yeah, what you got?
So I was wondering, do you get the benefits just from eating that, or is it like an extraction?
You do an extraction. It would not be bioavailable. We covered that this morning, yeah? It's not going to do it. So an extraction is the best. We're going to talk about extractions here shortly. So
Only grows out of truffles?
this one only grows out of false truffles, and the false truffle grows on the tree. See, so it's a difficult one. We might be able to grow it in a jar. I don't think anybody's tried. I think it's just for lack of trying. But I think if we get a couple people that are getting really good at growing truffles, is to try it, so we can fail forward. Fail forward. There you go. Lion's mane. We talked about this one growing on logs this morning. Good, edible. Tastes like crab meat and lobster. But did you know, too, that it's like one of the strongest nerve tonics? And it's easily to grow, right? These are growing out of sawdust bags. If you want lion's mane and you don't have time, you don't want to waste it, you can just order a couple bags of sawdust spawn, poke one hole, and out come the lion's mane, right, from the spawn. Then you could let it fruit once and maybe put it in logs. That might work, right? But this one's good. This one has what's called a nerve growth factor, NGF. What does that do? They're finding that it stimulates the reproduction of adult brain stem cells. Oh man, that's huge. They'll take mice. I know it sounds terrible, but this is animal studies. What are you going to do? I mean, they give mice brain damage, intentional, like a chemical that gives them brain damage, right? So all this is for data. And then they fed them lion's mane over a course of 30 days. Complete reversal of brain damage from eating this one. That's wild. I think we all could use some of this, huh? So you know what I started doing? Because I brew beer. I put lion's mane extract in the beer recipe. So it's like -1 + 2. Shit, come on, we got 1 more hour. We're going to do it. We're going to make it. But you,
No hangovers? No hangovers?
I don't know. I'm not making any medical claims. You can't. Yeah, so we're actually making, it's now commercially available around my area. Me and a brewer work together. You heard of the Mellow Mushroom Pizzeria, yeah? We have a lion's mane mushroom beer release party at the Mellow Mushroom Pizzeria on March 12th in Clemson, South Carolina, if you want to come. You're all invited. But it's a good mushroom. Maitake from this morning. Remember this one? This one is full of beta-glucans. So I'm going to tell you that this is one of the better mushrooms to put in a blend to treat cancer patients. It's really high in vitamin D too, and vitamin D is a steroid, so it helps in other respects. We need vitamin D. It's really high. For breast cancer cells, breast cancer, turkey tail right now are pretty hot. So I would recommend them as a preventative or a maintenance dose. You should take some of this, especially for like a female tonic. If you or someone you know has cancer, then I would put them on turkey tail and maitake together. Those two work good together. I hybridize it. Turkey tail, PSK, derived from that. That's the molecules of interest. That is the #1 selling cancer therapy in Japan. Right? You're talking about a country with a really, really low cancer rate. All right? They eat a lot of mushrooms, a lot more than Americans do. But they eat the right ones. A lot of enokis and nameko. Nameko is the #1 consumed mushroom in Japan. It's the traditional mushroom of miso soup. Right? But when they do get cancer, this is it, turkey tail. Don't you love the commercials? Watch TV, watch the nightly news from 6 to 7 o'clock. So you're going to write down every commercial that you see. What are they? Drugs. Yeah. Pill a day. Pill a day. Drugs. That's it. Over and over. I wrote them all down for a week. You know, that's a lot. Hammering the public, you know. There's trying to convince us that we're all sick of something, you know. Especially the depression ones. Those are my favorite, you know.
Well, if you talk to a psychiatrist or whichever one of those will prescribe those, they're basically prescribed on what the client wants.
Yeah. They'll ask for it, and they get referrals. You've seen it, man. They get kickbacks.
Crazy.
Yeah. I'm not going to be a conspiracy theorist, but let me tell you something. I mean, the #1 selling drug being an antidepressant, and that commercial says may cause suicidal thoughts, that's not healing. That's covering up the problem. All right? That's why psilocybin would be good for that. But you want to hear the commercial for, what's that? Yeah, it does work in a sick way. Yeah, like all those commercials may cause bleeding from the eyes, ears, and if you experience a sharp pain in your lower back, you may want to discontinue use. No kidding. You want to hear the commercial for turkey tail? Short and sweet. Negative side effects include temporary yellowing of the fingernails that goes away after 1 month. I can handle that. Right? No suicidal thoughts. Almond Portobello from earlier. One of the best mushrooms now, a rising star for cancer. That's why I want you to grow this. You know, this one grows in the summer, remember? So maybe April, May, plant this. Harvest a bunch of these. If you can't eat them all, saute them and freeze them after you cook them. or dry them and store them dry. They'll last a long time. Then you can make a tincture whenever you want. Yeah?
Did you say you were working with a company on doing blocks for those? Or?
Yeah, we should have some commercial blocks. We're doing some trials in 1 month. We're going to see how they do before I sell those.
Is the company you're working with currently doing what they call stage 3 blocks?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And they just don't have the spawn or the demand right now.
I tried to get on their book for 9 months, and they said, well, we're swamped.
Oh,
We can't take on new people.
okay.
I said, crap.
Here's how I did it. I lectured at Penn State, and I just think he's doing me a favor. That's all. I don't know. Anyway, it's just a trial to see if there's a market for this.
Just regular quarter.
Oh, yeah.
I don't have room to do compost, but I love that quarter by the pallet.
Yeah, that's what I do. So that's the Almond Portobello. Beautiful. There's the enoki again. Enoki also a cancer-fighting mushrooms. That's why I like to grow these in the light that they are hoping for and not in the darkness. It's got a novel antibiotic in it too, which is interesting. So it's highly active against staph. These are some enokis growing on a stump. See the one that had the light? See the darkness? And this one was growing under the leaves. I moved it. Now look at the pigmentation. Now you understand why. Look at the shape too, long and thin, high CO2. Polypores. This is a group. They're very slow growing mushrooms, right? Especially this one. This one's called a garricon. You're not going to grow it. These are endangered. But if you do see one, leave it there. But if you count the annual rings on this one is about 35 years old. 35. So if you take this off the tree, it's gone. You know, it's took a long time. We can clone these. That's the good thing. I could take a little piece, tiny little piece of that new tube there. That's all you need. And you can leave that one there. And you can grow the mycelium in the lab, lots of it. But you're probably not going to fruit this out, right? But what's interesting about these polypores, the cordyceps mushroom and the larger polypores, is their antiviral activity. I already described how that works. Interrupts those different modes. Lentinus strigosus. Now it's called Neolentinus strigosus. It's a pink, fuzzy little relative of the shiitake. All right? It's actually a polypore with gills. I saw this one. Actually, I saw this one from about 100 yards out in a football field, like in a park. I see it. I see these white specks on a stump. That's what my vision. That's my vision focus right there. Always looking for stumps. Like, hey, what's that? Went way over there. These little dried up mushrooms. I cloned them. I grew them. This one is parasiticidal. Name a parasite that you don't want. Name any parasite. Tapeworms. Trypanosomes, actually. Trypanosomes. Malarial parasites. Chagas disease, not Chagas mushroom, but look up Chagas disease tonight, or maybe on our next break. And tell me, do an image search. Don't do it before dinner. Or after. Just do it somewhere in between. It's terrible. It's a kissing bug. And if you're in South America, whatever, do you think Trad owns a face net? I do. Because I know these things are terrible. They'll land on the most vulnerable part of your body while you're sleeping, which is what is exposed? Your face. They fly in, they land on your face, and they inject. Before they take a meal feed, they're about this big. They're not small. So they crawl up on you somehow, and they inject an anesthesia so it numbs the spot they're sitting on so you can't feel them there. And then they take a meal feed out of your face. And this is the creative part. This one is going to get me high scores on the survey. Because it's interpretive. All right? It takes a meal feeding. It takes one step forward. right? You want to see that again? Poops on your face and flies out the window, right? The initial compound that numbed your face changes in about 5 minutes. It goes from numb to like poison ivy itch. So you're sleeping, your face is itching, you're asleep, you're dreaming about something. And you scratch the feces into the little wound. That's how it gets into your blood. Then it gets up into your brain and starts to do hemorrhaging. That only takes 5 to 7 days. This fungus is almost 100% active against Trypanosome cruzi, that one I just told you about. I like this one, you know. And that's the kissing bug. And it's moving this way. I think they found it in Texas. Yeah. You go to the tropics. How many of you go out of the country? Face net. Just saying.
So then the chemicals in that mushroom help treat the infection?
Yeah. It actually inactivates and kills the parasite. That's pretty cool. We already talked about psilocybin a little bit. I'm going to talk about another medicinal mushroom. This one's, I guess you could call it active, but it's a mood enhancer. You know? Do we need a little bit of that in our lives? You know? It's not going to numb you up like pharmaceutical drugs do, but you can microdose some of this stuff. And this one, I believe, is legal. I believe. But this one has a kava-kava-like derivative in it. And it just, the best way to put it is it makes you more promiscuous. Do you know what that means? You don't? It makes clothing optional, even in public spaces. Yeah. Makes you just a friendlier person.
If someone didn't microdose that, are they like very good?
If they took a full dose, yeah, maybe a big one. Yeah. I've only tried it once. It's, you know, you go down that rabbit hole once, you ain't going back. Why? Full honest with you guys. To understand it, you got to do it. The deadliest, I remember I was going to show you a deadly mushroom today. There it is. So that's the deadliest mushroom in the world. Destroying angel. So get to know it. It's all white gills, white veil, and it has a cup. Do you see that hiding in there? It's got it grows out of an egg. It's called a vulva. Shoop, and it comes popping out of there, and the little bottom of the egg stays there. Now you know it's an amanita, all right? So that's the deadliest mushroom on the planet, growing 8 inches from Psilocybin cubensis, right? It's down in Florida. That's the danger is, you know, somebody's out picking these things in the dark, kids. I had one poisoning case I had to respond to with a young teenage girl. All the other kids got these. She got that one, right? She had to have her mom's liver grafted onto hers 4 to 5 days later. She was slipping into a coma, right? Saved her. Either way, whichever one you eat, you will see a light. This one you're not coming back from. So get to know a destroying angel for you and your dogs, because dogs like to eat these. Destroying angels actually taste good. Poisonous mushrooms, most of them are bitter. You're going to chew it up and say, you just maybe spit it out or you vomit. A destroying angel stays down. All right? So how many hours does it take for a deadly mushroom? Do you remember? 6 or more. That's it. See all the stuff you learned today? It's exciting. You can't check, I learned nothing. Don't do that to me. Yeah.
So in that case, why weren't the 2 different mycelium attacking each other?
Oh, they probably are underneath the ground. This one's mycorrhizal. It's growing on the root system of trees. And this one's growing on manure on the ground. So they're really not interested in each other's territory either. But right where they meet, there's probably some metabolites going on, sweating it out. The reishi mushrooms, I can't stay on this slide too long, so you might want to take a picture of it. I'm going to photobomb my own slide. Now that we know about light and color, you see what's going on? Reishi mushrooms have the predisposition to change colors, and you can dial in a color based on the color of light that you have in your farm. And some of them are very organ-specific molecules. Like if you can get the reishi to grow black, you know, it's more active against lung cancers and stuff like, or TB. You know, tuberculosis, yeesh.
And that's just by the light.
Just by changing the light, and also the strain. You have to have a strain that can do that. But yeah, you can do it. So we grow our reishi in high CO2 and high light. The reason we do that is because we give them more surface area. All right? If we grow them in high light and high oxygen, they just flatten out, and there's not much of a solar panel there. Does that make sense? Very little surface area. If we do the CO2, they go crazy. Look at all that pigmentation. That's what we want, remember? Pigmentation. It's programming itself. So you can manipulate the environment, right, to do that. Reishi coffee is now a $1 billion industry in the United States, right, if it's made right. Right. I met with anybody heard of Jamaica Blue Mountain Coffee? Yeah. I walked into their office, kicked it in, said, we need to put reishi mushrooms in coffee and we need to import it because they have some of the best coffee in the world down there and they need to get into the game. I had those guys, they were convinced in 30 minutes. You know? They're like, let's do it. So we're going to grow all the reishis in Jamaica, put it in there. That's a good value-added product, for sure. Chaga, not Chagas disease. This is the chaga mushroom. Don't confuse this with other cankers on trees, okay? This is a corky mushroom. I'll show you the middle, but it has to grow on birch, some kind of birch. It loves yellow birch. I don't know what kind of birch you have here. A lot of river birch. Doesn't grow on river birch. But it's definitely a birch. Maybe you have to go to a higher elevation or something, because that's like me. I don't have any of the right birch around me. Up in Asheville, North Carolina, there's a little bit of yellow birch. I go up to Vermont, it's everywhere. And so is chaga. All right? So chaga, see how it looks like on the inside? It's very corky. That's a good word for it, corky. It's really solid on the outside. That is a hard rind. You have to hit that with an axe. But the inside is like, corky, kind of soft, a little spongy. This one is really high in beta-glucans as well. Kind of like the maitake. So what would it be good for? Cancer, right. So now, this is a wild mushroom too, by the way. I don't know if you can grow this. I've grown little tiny ones in the lab. But, so now you're looking at, if you were to make or treat someone with cancer, I would probably get them on Almond Portobello, turkey tail, maitake, and chaga. You see? Give them a broad spectrum. King tuber. All right. This one grows in Nigeria, grows out of rocks and sand. You can grow this in a bag. Any mushroom that forms a resting structure like this, the resting structure is the thing you want, because the mushroom mycelium magnifies it all into this structure, all the good stuff. So this is really high in beta-glucans again. All right, this one's brand new, kind of on the scene. I mean, people have been growing it, but the new research as a medicinal mushroom is going to skyrocket. There's the mushroom. That's how it's found in Nigeria, fruiting out of rocks. Look at that. Crazy looking. Doesn't even look like an oyster mushroom, but that's what... I think they're going to reclassify these, you know? It's just not right. What about one of the worst? Anybody ever known anybody with pancreatic? Right? I hate to say it, they're probably not around anymore. I've lost 2 people. Survival trend by tumor sites. There's pancreatic down there. 3% survival rate? Shh. you know, wow. That's the bad news. Here's the great news, is that mushroom, a particular mushroom called a bird's nest, you're like cheering the bird's nest, yay! Bird's nest is a tiny little fungus that grows in the mulch. It's probably around this building. It might be in the raised beds. It hides. It loves to eat mulch. It's everywhere. And it's highly active, right, in creating what's called programmable cell death. That's apoptosis is the fancy term. For a cancer cell is immortal, and this tells it that it's not. Right? It reprograms the cells to die again. That's called apoptosis. That's pretty wild. And this fungus does it to pancreatic cells. So that's huge. That's great. I think it would have to be a tincture, yeah. I know, that's it. The mycelium is active. That's the great news. So you don't need to grow these. You can grow these on a grain. So I think I'm basically making like cakes out of these. Got to try some stuff out. People have asked me to, I'm not a doctor, but I know a lot about mushrooms. Here's another book. You asked me for resources earlier. Write down this one. You should really get it, not because he's a good friend of mine, but it's The Fungal Pharmacy. Does anybody have it? Yeah. Fungal Pharmacy. Excellent. Excellent book. The author is Robert Rogers. It is an encyclopedia of medicinal mushrooms and lichens of North America. It's $30 and it's huge. And it's very well referenced. He lives like in Alberta, Canada. He's got nothing to do. Do you know how many books he's written? He gives me shit all the time. He goes, "Well, how many books have you written, Trad?" I'm like, 1. I'm like, "How many have you written, Robert?" 51. He comes out with a new book like every 3 months, right? He's an herbalist too. He treats patients. So I learn a lot from him. You learn a lot from that book. Every patient is different. That's why drugs are, drugs have been good for us for a while, and I understand. I'm not against sometimes you need to take that magic BB. You've got something really aggressive, and you need maybe a mixture between East and Western medicine. All right. I don't go to the doctor that much because I let my immune system actually battle itself out. Unless I'm like really hurt, bleeding, or dying, I'll go to the hospital. I'm staying home.
You gotta pay for insurance,
Yeah. Well, I pay for insurance too. Me, Olga, and Heidi, $500 a month, and you still go in there and still have to pay out of pocket. That ain't right. So here's how you do a tincture. You may want to take a photograph of that too. I think that might be a good idea.
This works for any type of mushroom?
Any type of mushroom. So I'm going to sum it up for you, all right? You take fresh or dried mushrooms. I prefer fresh. Because if you take dried mushrooms and soak them in ethanol, which is liquor, they absorb a lot of the liquor. So I like to at least rehydrate those with water a little bit, and then I like to blend them up. So you want to blend your mushrooms. You're going to blend them up to get more surface area. So you get your Vitamix ready, or your Ninja. That's what we use. We dump the mushrooms in there, fill it full of alcohol, blast it into a slurry. Then you're going to let that sit for 2 weeks. And all this is in my book too, so if you're thinking about getting it, it's in there. 2 weeks. After 2 weeks, you're going to drain out the solids, save your ethanol, right? Take your solids and you're going to put it in a slow cooker at 160 degrees with water in there. Good, clean water. Don't use city water. Find some good, clean spring water, something, And you're going to cook that at 160 when it hits 160 for 12 hours, right? And you're going to squeeze the stuff too, like tamp it with like one of those potato squashers or whatever. Then you're going to strain that out. Now comes the part. Now comes the part where you have to do some math. All right? You have to do C1, V1. Everybody have to turn this way for a minute. I hope I have a marker. Is there? Yeah. Anybody good with chemistry? Initial, or starting, right? So starting concentration, if you want to write that down. C is concentration, and V is what? Volume. I beat you to it. I know you guys are tired. I'm tired too. My voice is going. Ending concentration, ending volume. So let's look over there. What do we want our ending concentration to be? You see it? 20%. 20%. So how do you write 20% as a decimal? 0.2. So now we go 0.2. What's our starting concentration? It's really high alcohol. That depends on you. All right, so I used to buy Everclear. Anybody know what that is? But go ahead and get you some. I used to buy so much Everclear that the guy at the liquor store thought I had a huge drinking problem. Yeah. You're like, take 3 jugs of this. He goes, where's the party? You know? I'm like, tincturing. He goes, yeah, sure. So let's say your initial concentration that you soaked in is 95%. 0.95. Now, how much did you use? Let's just say it's a liter. All right, let's keep it simple. What's that in milliliters? 1,000 milliliters. What's our final volume? Well, you don't know yet. That's what you're going to find out. This is how you make a good tincture. And I'm going to teach you one more thing is, well, how many mushrooms did you put in there, right? Don't you, you should know that. So you're going to weigh your mushrooms. I need my calculator. That's what I'm doing. Ah, it's dead. Somebody has a calculator? Yeah. 'Cause I'm not doing this in my head. No way. Off to the side. All right. Let's say an active dose of reishi mushrooms is what? 1 gram per kilogram of body weight? It's a lot. It's actually 5 grams. That might be wrong. 5 grams for a 150, 160 pound adult. So make that change on your notes. 5 grams. Yeah, that's a mistake. I don't want to back it out because I don't want to mess with this PowerPoint. We're doing good so far. 5 grams for an average size human adult. All right. I'm going to put that over here. 5 grams per day. That's a maintenance dose. If somebody has a condition like cancer or diabetes, you take 4 to 5 times that amount. There's no LD50 for mushroom molecules. You can't kill yourself with it. You can take it straight, take it a lot. It's just not effective. I'll put it that way. All right? So somebody multiply 0.95 times 1,000 and divide by 0.2. 4.75 liters. Right? That's your final volume, your ending volume. Right? What did you start with? 1 liter. 3.75 you need 3.75 liters of your water extract. that goes into the cooker. Does that make sense? You need to end up with a final volume of 4.75. And if you started with 1,000 milliliters, right? So in your hot water bath, this is the hot water bath liquid, the amount that you need to add, right, to the 1,000 milliliters. That's all. All right? So now you have 4.75 liters. All right? Let's say you used 500 grams. You can fit that in there, maybe dried. Let's say you had 500 grams of mushrooms in that fluid. Right? What's the daily dose? 5 grams. So how many days is this worth? 100. All right? Now you have to divide this by 100 to figure out how many milliliters you need to take per day. Does that make sense? Yeah, there you go. So how much do you have to take per day?
Roughly 5 milliliters.
Like 5 milliliters. That's pretty good. That's not bad.